Hey guys, and welcome back to a little more remote learning with Maine Fish and Wildlife. Today we're going to continue our Unit 2 mammals notes, and we're going to take a look at some various reproductive strategies used by our mammals right here in Maine, and kind of compare and contrast these various strategies and think about which creatures use which strategies and why. So let's jump right in here. Hopefully you've already got your your Unit 2 notes open in Notability. We've already been working on those a little bit here. Those are sitting, let's see, Mammals Unit Guided Note Sheet. That's in Notability for us already. If you've been playing ball here and following along, you've got about this much done, and maybe even your antlers and horns stuff in there as well already. But we're going to jump in today on this second page here with reproductive strategies, and we're going to compare precocial and altricial strategies and K and R selection as reproductive strategies. So let's get right after it here. Let's think about precocial and altricial first of all. And with precocial, altricial, we're thinking about what do these offspring look like when they're born. There's kind of two distinct strategies here. With precocial organisms, they are born ready to go. Their eyes are open, they're able to move very soon after birth, and many can kind of feed themselves. Obviously, mammals are going to nurse their young, but if we're talking about birds or reptiles or things like that, those creatures feed themselves, those precocial organisms. But with mammals, obviously, they're still going to rely on mom for milk. But precocial mammals are kind of rare in the Maine woods. Let's get right to it on our notes, though. Let's say here that they're born ready to go. And often their eyes are open, they're fully furred or feathered with birds, and able to feed themselves. I think of this often, this is most common with birds. Obviously, we said mammals need to nurse their young, so we'll put birds here. I think about the baby chicks, the chickens, not wildlife obviously, but close descendants of wild birds. Chickens and turkeys and ducks and geese, they're all precocial birds, and they're born fully feathered, and they feed themselves. Those creatures they don't feed their offspring the way we think about other birds feeding their offspring. I ordered chickens last spring in the mail. They came as day-old chicks from Iowa in the U.S. Postal Service, and I just took them out of the box and put them in their little brooder. All I had to do was keep them warm, and they fed themselves and were able to find the water, and super little precocial offspring there. And the last one here, let's go back to our mammals though. Precocial mammals are rare in the Maine woods. These are mammals that give birth to fully furred offspring, eyes open, able to move on their own very quickly after birth. Many mammals are going to subscribe to this altricial strategy that we're going to talk about next. But in terms of precocial, there are only 3 mammals in Maine that are precocial. These would be the moose, the deer, which are 2 kind of obvious ones that a lot of people would guess, and the third one is real tricky, and most people would not get this. The snowshoe hare is a precocial mammal, and it wouldn't be right for me to not show you what I think might be the absolute cutest offspring in the Maine woods. There you go. There's a baby snowshoe hare, born fully furred, eyes open. They can hop around and evade predators very quickly after birth. And that's one of the main differences between hares and true rabbits. Hares are precocial. They don't use a den. They give birth right out in a thicket in the Maine woods rather than in a secluded den somewhere. So there you have it. There's your baby snowshoe hare. The official term for that would be a leveret. And that is a super cute little offspring found in the Maine woods. So we've got precocial organisms. There's a moose with her calf, and the classic example of precocial, able to walk and move very quickly after birth. And let's compare that now, though, with altricial offspring. And there we have a red squirrel with its newly born offspring. If any of you have ever had pet rabbits or guinea pigs or mice or whatever that maybe have babies, you'll see how pink and helpless and underdeveloped they are when they're born. Altricial offspring are born with their eyes closed. They're often naked, meaning they have barely any fur. They have to be fed by their parents in the case of birds mostly, and they're unable to move. They're confined to whatever nest or den site that they're born in. These are super helpless, vulnerable offspring. So let's go over here to our notes, and we'll say born helpless. these guys, are eyes closed, obviously, naked and afraid. They have no awareness of what's going on around them, and we'll say fully reliant on parents for just about everything. Human beings, pretty good example of an altricial offspring. I think about my kids when they were born, how 100% reliant they were on their parents for survival. Imagine if humans had precocial offspring. That'd be kind of crazy, right? Babies walking around the delivery room within an hour of being born and just grabbing a grilled cheese sandwich and just being good to go within a few hours. That would be pretty cool. But in fact, humans very, very altricial. It takes us quite a while to become nearly anywhere close to proficient there, right? So we got precocial and altricial, two different strategies involving what do your offspring look like when they're born. Now let's think about the numbers game and the amount of parental care that goes into this, and we'll compare K selection versus R selection. So the first will be K selection. These organisms have very few offspring. They invest a ton of time and energy into producing really high quality offspring with a very high likelihood of survival. And many of them are predators or large animals. And the black bear there in that picture is a classic example of a K-selected species. These guys are going to have 1 to 3 cubs on average once every 2 years. And those cubs will spend about 1.5 years with mom, maybe a little bit more, and really prepare for survival before they move on. So let's jump into these notes here. And we'll say they have fewer offspring. Lots of parental care and higher likelihood of survival. Right? We're going to put in a lot of time and effort, have very few offspring, but they're going to have a much better chance in the end. I think about things like whales that have 1 calf every few years, and elephants, which have an extremely slow reproductive rate, 1 calf at a time. These are classic K-selected species. Now the next one, I often think R selection, I equate that with rodents. I think of rodents often with R selection, and here's why. Here's a little den full of New England cottontail baby rabbits there that are just starting to develop hair. They're very altricial when they're born. A rabbit's den, by the way, is called a warren. And there's a bunch of New England cottontail babies in a warren in a depression in the ground, much different than that snowshoe hare we looked at earlier. So our selected species do the exact opposite. It's all about quantity over quality, right? They're going to have as many offspring as possible. They're going to invest much less time and energy into, getting them ready for survival. And many of them in truly our selected species will often have multiple generations in a single year. I think about snowshoe hare, which are an interesting R-selected species. They can have up to 4 litters a year of, 4 to 6 leverets at a time. They are constantly reproducing whenever the weather is warm enough. And the snowshoe hare is interesting in that they can be double pregnant, okay? So a snowshoe hare's uterus has these 2 wings in it. And just before she gives birth to one batch of leverets, she can become pregnant with the next, which is very rare in the mammal world to be able to have 2 batches of offspring going inside you at any given time. But that's a classic adaptation to be absolutely R-selected and produce as many offspring as possible, because remember, these are prey items that are being fed upon by just about everything out there in the Maine woods. So let's jump to our note sheet here, and let's think about R selection. We're going to say lots of offspring, less parental care, and we will say sometimes multiple litters in the same year. That's unheard of with our K-selected species that are going to have far fewer offspring and sometimes multiple years between those offspring. So there you have it. We've got precocial and altricial. What do you look like when you're born? Are you ready to go or are you helpless? And K and R selection is all about what's your strategy there. Are you going to have a few offspring and invest a ton of energy, or are you going to have as many as possible and send them out into the world? I think about our gray squirrels on campus. They have 2 litters a year with a bunch of offspring each time. There's very little parental care, and we see those young squirrels leaving the nest. They are super naive, and there's an insanely high mortality rate, meaning many of them, the vast majority, are gone within a few weeks of leaving the nest. They're eaten by predators and run over by cars and dying of starvation. They're just kind of ill-equipped because that's a classic R selection strategy of just producing lots of offspring and knowing a handful of them will make it, but most of them will not. So your assignment for today is also posted in Google Classroom. This is going to take you a little bit. It's due next time, so you don't necessarily have to finish it by the end of the block, but I would suggest you use your time wisely today, your class time, to get as much of this done as possible to reduce the amount of homework that you have to do. So this is called the Maine Mammal Reproductive Classification Chart here. And what you're going to do is pick one species from each of the major mammalian families that we've already learned about. Pick one member of each of those families. In some cases, obviously, there's only one member, so you don't have much of a choice. So pick one member of each of these, write its name in here, and then do some research online. Wikipedia is your best friend here, and I'll do one with you to show you how to do this. Think about how many does it have per litter? What do they look like when they're born? Real quick, give me a very brief description. Classify it as K or R selected. K or R is kind of fluid. Some of them are very black and white. Other ones, it's going to be your best guess, your opinion. But Precocial and Altricial is very cut and dry. And in fact, I just kind of gave you a little bit of a cheat code in the notes there and told you that there's only 3 mammals that are precocial. If you are not precocial, you are altricial. So if it's not one of the 3 mammals we listed in our notes, you know it's got to be altricial. And you'll see that in the research you do as well. I'm going to pick the bear here, and I'll do the bear with you to get you started. So let's do Ursidae, species name, black bear, right? We only have the black bear here in Maine, member of the Ursidae family. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Safari, and I'll just search up the black bear. And I'm willing to bet you Wikipedia is going to be our first link. There you have it. Here's a little trick I'm going to teach you right now. So Wikipedia, I can open up, and for some things, Wikipedia is not the greatest source. For other things, like creatures like this, it's pretty well accepted. Most of the stuff in here is going to be pretty close to accurate. The quickest way to do this, though, is to look under the Contents tab here, and let's look for reproduction, because that's all we really care about. We don't need to read this entire article. In this case, look at this, right under number 5 here, behavior and life history. I can click on reproduction and development. And this is where I do the thing that you guys out there really don't like to do in research. I'm going to read some stuff, okay? And reading some stuff is how you learn about stuff, believe it or not. So here we go. Under reproduction and development, it says sows usually produce their first litter at the age of 3 to 5 years, with those living in more developed areas tending to get pregnant at younger ages. The breeding period usually occurs in June through July. I'm skimming along looking for the information. Gestation period, here we go. Litter size is between 1 and 6 cubs, typically 2 or 3. 2 or 3 to me is a small number. That's leading me to think about K selection. At birth, cubs weigh less than a pound and measure about 8 inches in length. They're born with fine gray down-like hair, and their hindquarters are underdeveloped. They typically open their eyes after 28 to 40 days. So you're talking about being over a month old before you open your eyes. They begin walking after 5 weeks. Cubs are dependent on their mother's milk for 30 weeks and will reach independence at 16 to 18 months. So at a year and a half old, they're going to be independent. So to me, there's a bunch of things that tells me. Litter size is average 2 to 3. With, we'll say, fine hair and maybe underdeveloped. They're pretty much helpless. Are we a K or R selected? Bears are classic K, right? They're going to have very few offspring, spend a year and a half with them. We learned that from our reading. Precocial or altricial, very much altricial, right? They're born helpless, eyes closed. They don't open their eyes for a month and a half sometimes. And very much altricial offspring. We could also use our cheat code here and know that it's not one of the 3 precocials that we listed in our notes, so it must be an altricial mammal as well. So there you have it. I just did one of them with you. You have 9 more to do, and shouldn't take you that long. Do some quick Wikipedia research for each one, get this entire table filled in, and submit that in Google Classroom. I appreciate you tuning in today and all your hard work, and we'll see you next time.